I don't find the need to put myself out there constantly. I run a restaurant and the restaurant should run on its own merit. I get tremendous joy in what I do and I think that makes a big difference. And that's what AIB said, that you can get to Mars faster than getting a booking at Fatty Bar or something. I can't remember what it was, but it was.
Welcome to the Expressions podcast by the New Indian Express, where we dive into minds shaping culture and creativity. Today's guest is a true game changer in India's culinary scene. Chef Manu Chandra. From the elegance of olive bar and kitchen to the boldness of monkey bar, the inventive flair of toast and tonic, and now the refined European experience of Lupa, Manu's restaurants have redefined how we eat, drink, and gather. A chef, entrepreneur, and cultural critic, he's known for his sharp ideas, fearless innovation, and a deep passion for the craft. In this episode, we talk food, identity, disruption, and what it really takes to build a legacy, one plate at a time.
Thank you so much for coming.
Thanks for having me.
Chatting with you today. So you've often been described as rebellious, even iconoclastic, in your culinary approach, from shaking up fine dining norms to launching Lupa on your own terms. Looking back, what part of your early experiences gave you the confidence to challenge the status quo?
If I had to sum this up into a really short answer, I'd probably say it's because of trial and error. And there's a reason for that, because, all these words that you use to describe me, I think, are not something that happened by design, but they happened by accident. I came back home, which basically means came back to India, fairly unsure of whether we were ready to embrace that style of dining. And clearly we weren't. And that just kind of left me with this odd predicament, because expressing myself the way I'd been trained would have, it would have been a short recipe for disaster. And unfortunately, that wasn't a choice. So I had to adapt. And even the adaptation was way ahead, I guess, to what already existed in the market. And it was new for a lot of people. And I guess that's where that moniker comes from, because people weren't used to seeing that level of, elevated cuisine in a standalone format, especially because, fine dining had always been the bastion of five-star hotels, and that's really that. And Bangalore for the longest time equated fine dining only with five-star hotels. People didn't look beyond that. And then Olive happened, in 2005. It's almost 20 years now. Beautiful space. I remember we got written up in the New York Times with this nice picture saying this Miami-esque restaurant that's opened up there. Great pictures with this really, sexy food and all of that. But was Bangalore embracing it? Absolutely not. And I had no choice but to pivot and say, okay, how does one strike a balance that kind of feeds into aspiration as well as sustenance? And I think that's not always what fine dining is in the West or in many parts of the world, where it's very, very experiential. At that point I said, I think Bangalore's got at least 20 years to go before we can get to that point. And here I am 20 years later saying I stand vindicated, because that's how long it took. So if you look around you now and all the noise in the market and so many places opening up, and I'm so encouraged by that fact that there's tasting menu only restaurants, there's omakase restaurants, there's tiny little bars focused on really high-end cocktails. It took a very long time. Yeah. I think as time goes by, I kind of question that myself. I think humility tends to catch up with you as you get older. I was able to piece things together, and you don't really invent anything new in food, honestly. Nobody does. You just kind of play to your strengths and see if that's working for the market. But if you've been in a nascent market and seen it through its paces, you will realize that loyalties are very, very huge, right? And you have to work very hard at winning people over. and you're only as good as your last meal. It's a very unforgiving space.
Yeah.
You can have the greatest loyalties and they'll vanish overnight. So
Consistency.
consistency, and that's the challenge, and that's what I often tell writers, for example. I like, you write your piece and then that becomes iconic, and that's what's being read by people over and over again. You don't have to write it every day. In my business, you have to do it every hour, and you constantly driving that, and there's just so many moving parts, there's so many dynamics at play that the dynamics beyond your control. Sometimes you don't even know what's happening outside if you're stuck in the kitchen, and something could be going terribly wrong or terribly right, and you are completely clueless about why. So there's some fate involved in this as well, and that's really what brings it together, and that's also what makes it exciting. That's what keeps me glued to this. Like you said rightly, that I could have been chilling somewhere in an office, but and I have a beautiful office actually, but I just don't go there because I still find all the joy in the kitchen.
So you're also known to have a very strong work ethic. Where does that come from?
I have come from a system where you're working 16, 17 hours a day. These days it's called toxic work culture.
Yeah.
And as I mentioned earlier to you, I'm still one of the first people in and the last people out 7 days a week. It works for me. It might not work for other people who work for me, and they have the freedom and liberty to come, on terms that make more sense for them, get their breaks, etc. As long as there's efficiencies, there's discipline, and there is consistency at what I have prescribed, I'm perfectly fine with that. People call me a workaholic. I get tremendous joy in what I do, and I think that makes a big difference. If you're working in a place where you're just going to be miserable, or you created an environment around you which is not going to end well, it'll never end well. And if you contribute to your workspace, everybody contributes in meaningful ways, and make sure that everyone's propped up as opposed to pushing people down.
Yeah.
It's a great place to work at. Until that time doesn't arrive, there will always be a certain level of misery. And it's not prescribed misery, it's just by default, because every action has a repercussion on how the rest of the operation works. And I think most cooks who start out, most waiters who start out, start realizing that in their third, fourth, fifth years, that I need to make sure that everyone's working right so that this continues up the chain. And we've seen that. I mean, why only in my business? Any business, if there's one loose screw somewhere,
Yeah.
I mean, you have rockets blow up, for God's sake, because somebody missed tightening a screw somewhere. And that's really what happens, So there is this domino effect. I have an innate ability now, because I think of experience and foresight, to be able to predict that. So people say I have a black tongue, which I don't. It's just that, it's like those old Sherlock shows that used to come, So I used to basically be able to visualize how this is going to play out. And when something goes wrong, I immediately paint a picture about how this butterfly effect is going to cause tremendous angst at a table, or for a waiter, or for a plate of food. And it's not, they say it's premonitive. It's not. It's common sense. That screw is loose. Something's going to go wrong. Fix it at that point. Don't wait for it to amplify into something which is going to become unpleasant later. Which is also possibly why I tend to be very hands-on. Am I a control freak? Yes, I won't deny it. I do like things a certain way. And I'm very happy to step back if people are able to embrace that, the teams are able to embrace that. And they have in the past. And then I could step away. My existing restaurant, Lupa, of course, is a behemoth. It's a large operation. So it's not the easiest thing to let go of.
Yeah.
But now we entered our third year, and it's just getting better every day. So, it probably gives me a little more confidence of being able to say, okay, now I can take a little bit of a step back and start probably plotting something new.
How interesting. So you also come from a multicultural household, mix of UP, Punjabi and Tamil Nadu influences, ideas. So can you talk to us about some of the most important people in your life, earliest restaurant memories? Do you have like a special go-to occasion with families just now?
The beauty of growing up Obviously in a joint-like family. It wasn't a joint family, but my parents ran something like an open door policy. So I grew up with the doorbell ringing and people showing up with suitcases for 20 days. Nobody knew they were coming, but they were there and they were welcomed. And I don't even remember if I did have a bed, but how often one got to sleep on it was a different matter, because you're always on a mattress in the dining room or the drawing room or somewhere or the other, because relatives were over. And it was that level of hospitality is incredible. You don't see that anymore. Now people just want to meet at restaurants. How much entertaining happens at home anymore. But our house was like a factory. It was just, there was food being made all the time because there's just so many people to feed. There were aunts. My grandmother and my grandparents stayed with us. With my dad, he was the oldest son in a very large family. So by virtue of that fact, it kind of became the epicenter for the extended family. So everyone would always show up there. And obviously we were very well located in Delhi. So for a lot of people who lived around in smaller towns, Lucknow or Kanpur or Agra or whatever, it just became easier to come to Delhi. People from, flying in internationally also would invariably stay there. I just told you, it was an open door policy. My maternal grandparents lived 2 blocks down. So that was great because everybody was right there.
Yeah.
So there was this constant to and fro between households. Yeah. My mum's mum was Punjabi, and that entire family moved here, during the partition. And again, very large family. And my granddad was Tamilian, but he was one of these odd, rebellious types who ran away from home when he was 12 or 13 years old in Madras, and went and joined or got picked up by a lieutenant colonel or a colonel in the British Army and saying, "What are you doing running around the street? Why don't you come and start working?" This man with no formal education, obviously because he ran away while he was still in school, literally just ran away. And got basically mentored by this British officer who taught him how to repair tanks, battle tanks. And he got into the army and rose to the rank of a colonel and was there for 2 wars, in the reconnaissance mission, picking up Pakistani tanks and then, retrofitting them to make sure that the Indians could use it, and fascinating. And he was always somebody who was very, very gadget savvy and crazy. But, you can take the boy out of Madras, you can't take Madras out of the boy. So, you grew up making poris and having just the best sambar, yeah. Tamilian sambar, Karnataka sambar, and great dosas. And then, of course, the Punjabi side was doing that. And then my dad's family was from Lucknow. So there was just so much in terms of culinary offerings available all the time. And nuanced stuff, but nothing ostentatious. They were simple people. And I tell a lot of people this today also. I'm still not a big meat eater. And it's not a question of by choice or not by choice. I have access. I just don't have the desire, because I grew up in a household where it was an occasional thing. Even though the Kayasts are known for their love of, lamb, mutton, it wasn't something that was eaten every day. And it was certainly not something that you ate at every meal. You ate it once a week. It was celebration. Otherwise, you ate seasonally. One of my favorite things was to accompany my dadi, my grandma, to the then Sarojini Nagar market, which was basically one dingy, grotty, slimy space where you had to waddle through very, very muddy passages, because the vegetable vendors would keep washing the vegetables and all of that sludge would basically land up over there. With one bulb hanging over there, picking out the freshest of the season, putting it in the bag that we carried. So, sustainability, the farm to table, all of that already existed. Seasonality, biodiversity, these catchphrases, we lived it. Yeah. It was just how we ate.
Naturally,
And there was no conspicuous consumption. And everyone was fit. Everyone was lean. Everyone was active. It's how we lived. And I think that's always stayed with me. And I'm very glad that I continue to live that lifestyle. I still eat that one meal a day, which people find absolutely mind-boggling. They're like, how do you survive? I was like, you can actually very easily survive on one good, wholesome meal a day. And it's always what my staff eats. It's never something special. You will never, ever, ever catch me sitting at one of my restaurants. I mean, I just have one now, but and having a meal there for myself, which is made specially for me. I eat exactly what my staff eats, and there's no exception to that. There's no addition to it also. That's something made separately for chef on the side.
So you also talked about your early food memories with your grandmom.
Yeah.
Haath mein hai, and I loved it. Uh, and those big family meals, I can imagine, must have been something. So it got me thinking that chefs generally tend to make their best food when it's connected to a deep food memory, some deep food memories. So either it's a story of a grandparent or parent who taught them that dish. So how do you understand the connection between food and memory, and how do they impact chefs' work?
I kind of moved away from home very early because I went to study abroad, then I worked abroad, then I came back, then I wasn't living back in Delhi. I moved to Bangalore. I've kind of been by myself for a fairly long time, and it gives you a lot more perspective, right? It gives you a very, very clear perspective in life. And yes, nothing can dilute the power of memories that are associated with your growing up, your formative years. It will always be the best. But it is not always factually true, right? That this is an emotional thread that we pull at. It's not a practical one always. And don't get me wrong, I'm not taking away from the fact that obviously our formative memories form how we think.
Yeah.
But just replicating your past is not always an ideal thing to do when you're in a profession that is about selling food to other people. A friend in school, a Bengali boy, from a very interesting family, but he was a no-holds-barred type, right? He'd just say what he had to. And I come and eat at your house. There's some stuff I really like, but there's just some stuff that I can't palate. It makes no sense to me. And that always got me thinking, I'm like, why does he say that? Because I think it's very tasty. And then I tried some of the stuff at his. I'm like, yeah, I get it. I mean, there's some of the stuff that I don't like, but there is some stuff over there with similar vegetables, etc., which is just a lot tastier. And I think that gave me perspective at an early age, saying, learn to appreciate a lot of other stuff. There is no one size fits all when it comes to food. It's such a, it's so relative, right? What I think is outstanding may be completely rejected by one of my customers because they want something which is just completely I mean, it happened just yesterday. Somebody sent back this beautiful Caesar salad that we do with this nice, beautiful rosette, which is like the hottest thing in fine dining globally, with little strips of kale and this and that. And that guy was just so incensed. He's like, what is this? This is the worst Caesar salad I've had. There's no iceberg lettuce in this. There's no big chunks of, croutons. And I'm like, let it be. Just ask him to eat something else. Because I'm not going to make him that. But I said, sure. I mean, that's your opinion. It's relative because you've only eaten that, right? And the moment you take iceberg lettuce and put in dressing, it just releases all its water and it becomes, it's halfway between a stew and a salad. It's not even a salad anymore. But that's all that was available in Bangalore for the longest time because it was the easiest thing to grow. Now, of course, you get all these fancy things and there's hydroponic farms everywhere. In fact, I was one of the first chefs in the city to use arugula. And we got someone to grow it for us. This guy was doing it near a graveyard somewhere in Bangalore because he's like, that's the best place to do it, apparently. And I didn't ask why. I didn't want to delve into those details, but it worked. And people would line up to try to buy it from us, saying, can we just buy a bunch? And they know it's only for restaurant use. You can come and eat, whatever we do with it. But yes, going back to that point, I'm like, yes, those food memories are very compelling. They will always form the character, the individuality of the chef. But you have to always look beyond that. And yes, all our grandmothers were outstanding cooks. But some grandmothers may have been better than the other grandmothers. This is something that we're never willing to admit. But it is true. And sometimes you eat the same version of that dish from a different household and you're like, maybe I didn't get the brief or I didn't follow the recipe right or my memory is a little altered. But there is always variation. And then again you sit down and you think back and you're like, why don't you kind of remember their conversations? And they would discuss, XYZ's household, they make that outstanding dish.
Yeah.
And that's when more perspective comes. So I think, again, yes, it's almost a reflex for chefs to say, oh, memories. And yes, that's really what inspired the whole thing. But there is a lot more audit that is required in your own mind to be able to get to something that makes sense when you're actually serving it to customers in a commercial space.
Yeah. You obviously evolve. So you graduated from St. Stephen's College in Delhi. Who were your best friends? What were they like? Did you get into trouble? What was the worst thing you did in college?
No, I was very pavam. I didn't get into trouble. I have my own ways of getting into trouble, but not that much. I've always lived a very clean life, and I think that's kind of helped. Not for anything else. I just was able to self-audit, and of course, you look at the Marco Pierre Whites of the world, and that didn't they, cigarette dangling, gaunt completely, always drug-addled, etc. I think in the first year of college, I remember I stepped out in class, and a couple of my seniors, they were just bawling, in the corridor, and I must have been a month or 2 months into college. And I'm like, what happened? Why are you crying? And they were like bawling, right? In each other's arms, and they were seeing each other at that time. So their best friend apparently died the night before. It was an overdose of some kind, because obviously drugs and all had, hit North Campus in a big way.
And back in those days too?
Yeah.
Okay.
It wasn't that many years ago. It was about 22 years ago, whatever it was, 23 years ago. And that was a very sobering experience, because clearly a lot of people seem to have no control over their actions. And that was a sobering experience for a lot of people around, that this happened within a month or 2 months of college. We were a very pavam batch overall. And that's, that's how I've stayed. No, I have a wicked sense of humor. Does that get me into trouble sometimes? Sure. I do call a spade a spade. Does that get me into trouble sometimes? Sure. And early days of Twitter, I remember I used to get into trouble a lot. I had a fair amount of following. I've not been on Twitter for almost 8-9 years now. And whatever, X now.
Yeah.
I'm very glad for it. I think everything had become so noisy. It was just like, why do I want to open this and just be bombarded with so much negativity and toxicity every morning? This makes no sense. This is not really adding value to my life. And it tends to make you say things that you don't necessarily need to say. But you somehow feel self-pressure to just be part, be more visible, be more woke, I guess. And I'm very happy not being that. So yeah, been off that. And I don't find the need to put myself out there constantly. I run a restaurant, and the restaurant should run on its own merit. And it should run as a product, and it does. That's what brings people back in. I do realize that today, and we were just discussing this earlier, that the number of people who just do not read enough is staggering. I mean, we've gone to caveman times. We only, respond to visual stimuli. So if that be the case, then I guess I need a team that can push that agenda to a certain level. It's a marketing effort more than anything else. But yeah, it's not been my thing ever. My sense of humor or my being honest sometimes does get me into trouble, but nothing major.
Okay. Also, you moved from Delhi and to Bangalore, and Bangalore is a very cosmopolitan city. Hindi works well, but it has its own lingo.
Yeah.
How long did it take for you to get used to the Bangalore lingo and start using it?
Oh, there's so many Bangalore lingos.
Yeah.
I mean, like, depends. If somebody went to St. Joseph's, they talk a certain way. If somebody went somewhere else, they talk a certain way. The locals talk a very different language.
Yeah.
If there are a bunch of kids who move to Mandya and start working here, they have a different way of working. So there is variations within that. And if you live here long enough, you can pick those variations out, so you know exactly where they're from. I don't necessarily speak that lingo. So it's not that. So that in the kitchen, because I want everyone to be able to communicate at one level. Otherwise there's too much confusion. And it happens because there's so many silos. I have 2 Andhrites on one station. I have 2 Kannadigas on one station. I have 2 Bengalis on one station. And I'm like, boss, please try to speak to each other in one language. The Manipuris, the Nagas, everyone has their own thing going. I was like, how will you ever communicate effectively? I mean, at least here we need one language and just decide what that is. But just stick to it so that everyone knows what's going on. Otherwise, you guys are at it in your own thing, which is great. But especially my service stuff. And I tell them that if you don't make it a habit to speak in English constantly, you won't be able to sharpen the skills to be able to communicate with the customers, because not all customers are going to be speaking your lingo. So it's again a discipline thing, right? It's not the discipline that is needed to make an efficient establishment. But I've been around these languages for so long that I know exactly what they're saying, and that's enough to deter them.
Yeah.
So they'll never speak shit about me when I'm within earshot in their lingos.
Also, you studied and worked at New York. The kitchen culture here and in New York, how different is it?
Very, very, very different. Even though I was there last month and bumped into an ex colleague of mine who's now the big star in New York. His review just dropped in the New York Times 3-4 days ago. Glowing review, 3 stars. Paul Carmichael.
Okay.
His new restaurant's called Kabawa. So he's also gone back to his roots and he's done Jamaican food. And we used to cook together in New York. And his lament wasn't any different to mine. He's like, it's impossible to find people who want to work anymore. It's just a nightmare. And everybody who's coming in is coming in with these absolutely bizarre, illusions of grandeur without having the requisite talent or experience. And that's a scary thought, which is where my kitchens tend to differ and why they say that I'm a bit of a tyrant when it comes to that. Is like, I'm not going to reward mediocrity. I really want to reward meritocracy. So work your way up. Just because you think you're cool doesn't make you cool. I love your positive attitude, but I'm sorry. In this hierarchy, you need to be able to do better than the next person. I have a dossier this thick of culinary school graduates right now who all want to be stars. They say it to me, ostensibly, that how do I become a celebrity chef? I'm like, I don't even know how to answer this question. It's just the most bizarre question. And I don't know. Do it on Instagram or something. Why do you need to be in a kitchen at all? No, you don't need to feed people. You just need to pretend, and you don't have to feed anyone. And if it's working for you, then great. That's the shortest path to it. It's not going to happen through a regular kitchen setup. It takes time. I've always given this 7-year thing, right? And people feel very daunted by that number. But it's true. If you're starting out, it takes about 7 years to be able to pick up enough skills, to be able to pick up enough confidence, to be able to pick up managerial skills, to be able to understand how many parts basically come together. And they don't even understand there's a huge business that there is to run outside of just that kitchen. And there's 500 things happening over there, which they're completely oblivious of, which was the biggest, bust that happened maybe a decade ago, when a whole bunch of these people who wanted to be celebrities launched their own restaurants with no concept of how a restaurant works. And the bust rate was insane. And how quickly you had them all joining regular restaurants again was staggering. Which is great in some sense, because now they've learned from the experience. They've learned the hard way. Failure is the greatest teacher.
But when I was chatting with Alex, he was telling me about this toxic kitchen culture in New York. He was also working with Michelin star restaurants, and he said that he tried to do that in Bombay, and it didn't work well with the staff, and he obviously had to change himself to adapt and to retain staff and to also feel less guilty about being so harsh. So what do you think about that?
I feel very guilty. I still yell a lot. I'm not going to lie. I'm not going to deny it. Sure. That's just me making myself feel better. But usually it's always spurred by something that's going fundamentally wrong. Like I told you, I know that butterfly effect.
Yeah.
It's not just me walking in and just, lambasting. Otherwise, I'm joking around with these guys all the time, having fun, etc.
Yeah.
But when I see that there is a fundamental flaw in the way somebody is approaching work or product or is disrespecting the property of a business, and there's so many ways of doing it, right? Just being tardy and just saying, I don't feel like doing this, it's not perfect, and just throwing everything into the dustbin. That's money being canned right there. Money that everybody else has to work very hard to earn. When they reach that sort of level, that's when they get it from me, and in no uncertain terms. And it's usually very floral, and I use multiple languages. That's where I get multilingual. No, in new kitchens especially, it's bound to happen. But if it's just continues indefinitely, that's a problem. New kitchens have a tendency of creating a lot of churn. This girl came for a trial a few months ago. She just walked up to me. She's like, "Okay, I'm applying for a senior role." I was like, "Great, just work for a day and let's see how you are. Do you want me to cook something for you?" I was like, "No, it's not necessary. I just want to see how you work." And then I saw at the corner of my eye, wasn't looking directly, trying to cut an onion. I was aghast at how this person had been able to reach this level in another kitchen. And that was the skill that was on display. It is a skill-driven business, okay? You don't need the gift or the gab to be a successful cook, which then makes you a successful chef. You need to have the requisite skills, and they were completely non-existent. And she realized very quickly that I saw that and just vanished. I went for a loo break, and then apparently somebody saw her running out of the restaurant with bags in hand. We've had uncomfortable situations otherwise also. There's been a lot of friction between, we had a lot of women working in the restaurant, and a lot of guys who just came from backgrounds where they have not been taught tact, communication. Even though we've had, I don't know how many trainings on posh, on all kinds of stuff, right? Even the trainings, they teach all kinds of stuff, good touch, bad touch, the way you speak, etc. It's this verbal diarrhea that comes out of half their mouths when the boss is not around, right? Which is always a fear for me. You're like, why aren't you getting married? Now, that will antagonize somebody, especially somebody who has been working in kitchens. She is older. She doesn't like that because that's the sort of nagging that they've escaped from their house.
Correct.
They're happy. They're independent. Bangalore is good for them. The weather is great. The scene's great. The pubs are great. The last thing you want to hear that is from some, upstart cook who's just moved here from another part of the country. That starts causing a lot of friction. Now you're going basically putting out one fire at a time. Now, is this a culture problem? Is it an individual problem? Can an individual be enough to rupture a culture? Yes. The answer is yes. And the reason for that is no matter how anyone feels antagonized, they have a tendency of blaming the system. It's the system that failed. Yeah. And we've let lots of people go because they made inappropriate, remarks, etc. And that's grounds for firing. You're like, bye-bye, this is not working out, which impacts the establishment immediately because now you're down one person, two people, three people, whatever it is, and you have to quickly try to find somebody who's clearly not trained, but you'll have to train them again. So that's part and parcel of the business.
But after whatever you've shared, I must say that I've been to your restaurant a couple of times, to Lupa, and definitely the people who serve, and I've been to other restaurants, there's definitely a difference, and you guys are
I take so many trainings. Yeah, I used to train 4 times a week, 2 hours, 3 hours every time, and I know it was exhausting for the staff also because you're working a full shift, or a break shift, whatever, and I'm taking up your break time. But they were there willingly because I was never ever teaching them about the menu. I was never teaching them about wine. I was never teaching them about how alcohol is made. I was teaching them about art. I was teaching them about history. I was teaching them about philosophy. I was showing them little movies, snippets of cultures from around the world, humor. I wanted them to be able to develop their own personalities and bring that to the floor, not be mechanical.
That's amazing.
And it shows, and it gets better every day. Yeah. Sharp knives, something as simple as that. It's amazing how many cooks don't have sharp knives, and that's my pet peeve, right? And I can hear it. After that long, you become so intuitive that you know when someone's cutting that far away that their knife is not sharp. And I call it from across the kitchen, your knife is not sharp. You can tell literally from their shoulder action that their knife is not sharp because everything would move differently, right? That's what I'm telling you, that the longer you spend in that space, you'll be able to pick out a lot of nuances.
Yeah. And also, can you tell me about your religious or spiritual beliefs?
I don't know. I show up for Diwali, etc. at home and we do our little puja. My grandmother was very, very pious and very religious, and we had a little temple at home. which was this chest of curiosities, because it was full of all these beautiful things. In fact, one of the little idols that we've had there, which is the family idol of Radha Krishna, I think that's almost 250 years old. So it's been going down generation to generation to generation, and we have everything over there. But now if you open that temple, you'll see a little Guru Nanak, you'll see something from a church, you'll see something from a mosque, everything is there. And I think as a family, people just embraced everything, right? We celebrate Eid and Christmas with equal gusto as we did Diwali. And my parents had friends from every single walk of life and every religion. And our house, like I said, open door policy became that place.
Yeah.
So, come Eid, then we'd speak to some caterer in Jama Masjid who was this old type caterer, was Sheila Dikshit's caterer also, outstanding guy. And these giant digs of, kormas and biryanis would arrive, and, with Delhi style sheermals and naans, and some of them call it Dunlop over there because they're such thick rotis. And Christmas, there would be from plum pudding to, everything. So I don't think I've never been too religious. I cook for a lot of fascinating people. The whole Virat thing that happened because he posted the story.
Yeah.
I did post it.
Yeah.
Which is a huge anomaly, right? It doesn't do that.
Yeah.
One of my favorite authors, I did a meal for him not so long ago. I remember picking up his book when I was in New York many years ago, and I was a voracious reader, and Barnes and Nobles was my place to hang out at. I would finish, in between work or whatever, right near Columbus Circle where I was working, there was Barnes and Nobles, and I just buy books and constantly read. And then this book came out called Complications by Atul Gawande. And Atul Gawande is just incredibly gifted author. He was a doctor who was the head of medicine under Obama. And obviously, so big time, but that happened much later. And Complications is, his parents were doctors. He was a doctor, grew up in the US. Essentially about how so much medical science is based on guesswork. So you guess your way through, right? You try, and then it fails, and then you try again, and then you try something else. There's some sure shots, many of them aren't. That actually gave me a lot of perspective on life in general. A couple of his books, there's another book that he wrote called Checklist Manifesto, which is about how airlines operate, right? How pilots operate. You have a checklist for everything. One sheet can solve the greatest crisis sometimes. So sometimes you need to be a little more practical or a little more daring as opposed to just going with a tried and tested, because tried and tested doesn't always work.
I agree. Also, you were one of the youngest executive chefs in the country when you joined the Olive Group.
Yeah.
What was that chapter like, especially launching Olive Beach in Bangalore, which went on to become a landmark?
It was mad. That's the example I tell all my 24, 25-year-olds right now, that boss, why are you behaving like a child? 3 years before you, I was already the boss. Do you realize the sort of the responsibility that comes with it? And it came with a lot of issues. I'll not deny it. I was too young to be a boss. And I did not have that level of experience. I had to kind of find my own way. The shooting in the dark, I made the most terrible mistakes doing that. And I'm very happy to admit it, or maybe not so happy to admit it, but the fact is that you kind of figure things out. But it also gives you a very fresh perspective. So you do things in a way that work for you. That's why I said, if I had gone through the rigmarole of management courses, I would not have had such a direct approach in being able to address a bunch of people if there was an issue, as opposed to calling one by one everyone in the office and then having a form and then ticking it off. And really, do you think that'll work with a bunch of people who probably have not even gone through a formal education system? You work on a very different paradigm. People say, oh, you're strict. I'm like, sure. Let's also tell the army to open a circus and not be strict, and then ask them to defend you. But this is not war. You're not the army. Yeah, we can go into this obfuscation-based debate forever. But if something goes wrong, you are going to be the most antagonized, the most rude, the most entitled customer there ever is. Think about that. I did that at the Vicky Flow event recently. Something I said, I don't know what I said. I told you, sometimes I'm just such a moped. I looked around. about something, and I said, about kindness to staff and hospitality people in general. I think, why is it that all of you come and take your angst out on poor hospitality staff? You didn't find anybody else to get angry at. You had a fight at home, take it out on them. Something is a little cold, you take it out on them like your life has ended, for God's sake. It's a meal, it's a restaurant, it can be reheated, it can be got out fresh. Why did the world suddenly cease to exist for that moment? And did you see how you spoke to them? And I don't stand for that. I absolutely don't stand for that. You cannot speak to my staff that way. I will throw you out of that restaurant without any regrets. Okay, you have to be able to stand up for yourself. And a lot of people don't like me for that because I'm self-assertive. Are you mad? I mean, thank God I got an education, right? Because these are things that you're taught. I grew up in a household where when the postman came, my grandfather would open the door. The postman loved my grandfather. Not only would he invite them, because Delhi, it gets 45, 46 degrees in the summer. And these guys are walking around, and before, DTDC and, whatever, delivery was there, postmen were postmen.
Yeah.
And my granddad was a scholar, so a lot of stuff used to come through registered post with those wax seals and all of that. They would come, they would be sat at the dining table. Then my poor grandmother or somebody had to go and make a nice nimbu pani for them. Chit chat, how's the family, this and that, sit on the fan for a little while, chill out, and then go. Everybody was respected like that. Every year there would be some Devi, I don't even remember what that occasion is, but all the domestic help from around the area, and we live in a very, very affluent area. I mean, it's probably the most affluent area in the country. And all the help, all their daughters would be called in for this feast that would take place at our house. Everyone would sit at the dining table, they would be fed, they would be pampered, and they would become invariably people who just keep showing up, just to say hi, just to come chill, have a cup of tea. That's that sense of community you develop. It's almost absent now.
Absolutely.
If it's not for the gram, which is so much faking, it's unbelievable. It's just missing. And I find, I think that's just absolutely diabolical. I really think that people really need to learn how to carry themselves in public spaces. Customer ones who, it was a busy service. I told you I don't step out. You will not see me out in the dining room schmoozing all the time. I'm cooking. I mean, you decide what you want me to do. Would you rather I may be making your food? Or would you rather I be prancing around your table? While other people also aren't getting the opportunity of having that, control by me. That's how the system is built right now. Will I be able to let go of it? Sure, at some point. But good Lord, one person just kept calling. And the service staff are now, they have these standing instructions. I'm busy. Don't drag me out of the kitchen. If it is so compelling, bring them. I have a beautiful kitchen, right? Bring them into the kitchen. I'll have a chat with them while service is on. Not a problem. But this person apparently didn't want to do that. And then finally I stepped out because so many reminders had come. And when I stepped out, oh, good Lord, the way he spoke to me. And I'm not going to take that. And he may be somebody, right? But got it in front of his guests in a way that he will probably not forget for the rest of his life. I said, don't you ever walk into my house, right? And talk to me like that, to my face for no reason. You can't just click your finger and expect me to come groveling to you. This is not what I do. All right? Now you and your guests, please leave. You are not welcome here. This is not how you behave. And that too with the owner of the restaurant. What the hell is wrong with you? How delusional are you? Now what are you going to say? That I'll sign a check and buy this place out? I said, I'll send you the figure. You can't afford it. Leave. So that was a double whammy. But I'm pretty sure he'd never ever do that anywhere else again. Have some respect. You don't need the chef to be prancing around your table to take an order. I have service staff to do that.
Yeah.
It's a busy night. It's a big restaurant. I can't be at every table. It's impossible. And I have great managers who do just that. I have great chefs I can send out. They chat, they're happy, they're communicative. There's a couple of them which the staff love. They don't even know who I am. I can be sitting next to their table. They have no concept of who I am. They're like, where's the chef? No, that guy who comes and chats with us every time, because we have such great people for that.
Yeah.
Respect that.
Yeah. So, talking about Olive Group again, you played a key role in shaping the identity of several Olive Group restaurants. What were some of the defining creative breakthroughs during your time there?
The interesting stuff that I started doing early, which was let's say around 2007, 2006, 2007, was I started integrating a lot of local ingredients in Western cuisine.
Okay.
So, Dode patre, which is your ajwain leaf.
Yeah.
You wouldn't ever associate that going in a ravioli,
Yeah.
but I did that. And I was using very advanced cooking techniques, which nobody had heard of that time. I was doing it, and then I think Abhijit opened Caperberry, and he started doing that. But of course, that became all about molecular techniques, etc. I wasn't doing so much of that. I was quietly. I wasn't talking it up. But be it sous vide cooking, be it espherifications and stuff like that, I was already trained on that. I opted not to exercise too much of it because I thought it might intimidate the customer. And very often, I don't think I need to talk too much technique because, again, it has a tendency of becoming a little cumbersome. You'd rather just see what's on the plate and be happy with that, right? And that's a philosophy that I still follow till date. So yes, a lot of biodiversity and local ingredients in a Western cuisine setup was not something that people had ever seen. Bathua is something I grew up with, which is lamb's quarter, right? One of the most nutritious greens you can eat. Definitely not contaminated like a lot of spinach tends to be. It's literally across, it grows wherever wheat grows. Wild. It's a weed, and we actually declared it a weed. People are crazy. You can interview Vandana Shiva about that. But I grew up eating that, and it was always preferred over spinach in our house because it was the most nutritious thing you would eat. It was easily available. It was easy to cook, and it was just so much tastier. So I started making stuff out of that. So I had a soup with that. I had used it in a cannelloni filling also, and I still do, by the way, Lupa. I have bathua mixed into my cannelloni mixture, and it's just so much tastier. One day, Krishna Gowda called me and said, "Can we catch up for a coffee?" I said, "Sure." And me being me, I was like, "You can meet me at the restaurant instead of," and he was the sitting minister at that time. He's like, "Yes, I will come and meet you at your restaurant. You're busy, man." And he did. And he's a bit of a technocrat, right? So he's like, "Manu, what do we do? People aren't eating millets." This was a state where till the 60s, almost 70% of the carbohydrate intake was using millets. It's down to less than 5% now. And that's dire because this crop has everything going for this. Now we're talking about 13, 14 years ago, right? And he's like, "I need people like you to get involved somehow. Why don't you?" And I said, "Look, I will absolutely agree that even, I don't use it enough. And we've not got it in our repertoire as much as we should." And there was me and there was another chef at that time at the Taj, Vivanta. We got together and we did a launch party at Toast and Tonic had just opened.
Yeah.
And we did a millet party. And we called a lot of people and said, "Look, the cool things that we can do with millet." And then that became a movement. And it sort of kick-started from there and became trendy. And the year of the millet was just recently. That's when I was doing the Canfil Festival.
Yes.
But that was big, and it genuinely found its way onto a lot of menus. And now there's millet beer and this and that, of course. I still think there's a long way to go. But I've always maintained that things like this take 20 years. So if that started in earnest about 5-8 years ago, there's still 12 to 14 years before you'll actually see this becoming a lot more mainstream. But yeah, people want quick results. Then I think moving from the fine dining front, when we decided to open up something which was more accessible, the whole monkey bar thing happened, and that became such a rage. And I still think, and I firmly believe that the model that we created with that then became a benchmark for a lot of people. So a lot of products across the country that opened with that gastropub line, right? That we want to be about food also, we want to be about fun also. And everyone's that now, right? Even the breweries took off from there. Took off in that sense, took notes from that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Monkey became a wildly successful brand. I wish we could have scaled it better. And then Fatty Bao happened. Actually, there was a failure that happened in between.
Who was that?
That was from a Bangalore Lingo. It was called Like That Only. And that was all the way in Whitefield. At a time that Whitefield was just not ready.
Yeah.
And but there was this beautiful property that these friends of mine from regular customers at Olive, they had, and they built it from scratch to be a restaurant. It was stunning. So we took that on soon after Monkey Bar, and we opened this crazy restaurant, whimsical, called Like That Only. Asian, but very, very whimsical, very art forward. Anshu Arora, who's a fabulous fashion designer, does incredible work with fabrics and shapes and forms. She used to have a small shop. I think that was the name of her shop. Anshu and Jason. And she designed the chandeliers, which looked like so we basically retrofitted a lot of stuff. We went and bought these big channis, these sieves, and then we welded these wires which had little metal dragonflies flying out all over from this. And these were the chandeliers in the restaurant. We had little German doll heads, very eerie looking cupboard, medicine dolls they're called, which was one art installation. We had random pieces picked up from Chor Bazaar in Bombay and all, turned into these light fixtures. A scooter was sitting in front, which was painted in this cool way. There was a bathtub as you entered, with a giant shower, which was a fountain with a lily pond, right? So it was crazy. People, again, right product but wrong place and wrong time. We just couldn't get it to work, and people loved it. People still talk about it, but it's a business. The money matters, and the money wasn't making sense. We were just losing way too much of money that we were making at Monkey Bar at that time, because that was just a printing machine for money, and which we hadn't anticipated. Honestly, I had not anticipated that. That had not been programmed into our projections. I had said this would be a nice little neighborhood bar serving great. You could get pandi curry over there. You could get a dal pakwan over there. You could get. I even ran ragi mudde in my own version with a nice saru. You could get a great burger. You could get something Chinese. It was totally multi-cuisine. But things that I enjoyed eating. And I said, I'm just putting that out there, right? And people just loved it. And you see interviews and articles and write-ups and videos and photos of those days, and the service was incredible. I'm not digressing. I'm just like, that was just doing so well. And the numbers were just stratospheric. I mean, what we had projected, we were doing almost 3 or 4 times that. And we literally broke even in 8 months. A return on investment. We broke even in our first month, but our return on investment was less than 8 months. And that time we had PE funds and all in the company. So they're like, oh my God, this is the golden goose. We need to have lots of these everywhere in the country. And that's when the whole scale began. But I wasn't convinced when I was closing Like That Only that I said, you know what? The 2 things that nobody is really doing in India right now are baos and ramen. So I created a product cycle. We stripped down that restaurant, and we were opening our second Monkey Bar in Bangalore in Indiranagar in a very quiet lane called 12th Main at that time, with this beautiful tree in front of us. And I fell in love with the building because of that tree. So Monkey Bar was on the ground in the mezzanine, and the landlord kept saying, take the top floor. No one's taking it. Take it. Take it. There's no tenants around this area. I was like, okay, let's see. So we went up and saw it. The rent was nothing. And as you went up, you just had this gorgeous tree in the window and then on the terrace, which is no longer there, unfortunately. And I fell in love with the space. And I said, okay, let's do this. So I convinced the board. I said, give me a shot at creating another brand. And while they weren't amenable to it, I said, look, it's going to cost us nothing, because essentially I'm taking everything that we are shutting down from there. I'm just making a little more high street. And I'm changing the brand name and I'm putting it out there. Well, they got convinced because the monies were very small, the investment. And Fatty Bao was born. And then, the rest, as they say, is history, because that became so popular and viral. And now I hear that Jalandhar has birthday parties with baos in it, and Raipur has them. And so it basically entered the repertoire, so to speak. While everyone was opening gastropubs and gastropubs after Monkey Bar, Bao became great. So there were these 2 big pivotal moments. for the new company in which I was a partner. And that's what AIB said, that you can get to Mars faster than getting a booking at Fatty Bar or something. I can't remember what it was, but it was. And like Virat came, Deepika and Ranveer were dating at that time, and they were one of the first people to show up there. Again, somebody I've known for so many years. I mean, she was a Bangalore girl. So the first time I met her, she was 16, I was 20 or something, right? And I was just, or whatever, 17 and 21, just about to get her first break. And so all of that has just kind of fallen into place. It's not been engineered. I've not tried to do that. I've not picked up the phone saying, please come, and post a picture. It just happened and it worked. But yeah, I think those were the big ones.
Yes. So what eventually made you decide to leave the Olive Group? Was there like a deeper inner shift that made you realize it's time to create something of your own?
There's very few people or very few chefs who can say that we've run one resume that long, right? And I think I had definitely contributed very actively to the growth of the company. And then COVID happened. And I think the pandemic in general was a great leveler of things for a lot of people, especially in how they thought and how they approached life. It was also around the time that I lost my mom, who was, she'd been suffering from cancer, but the pandemic just made everything inaccessible, especially hospital care. And but that happened, and I tried to set one of the restaurants. I was also heading up the restaurant association at that time. So I was doing lobbying. I was talking to people. I was out there in masks, speaking to government, to chief minister, this, that, to try to get restaurants off the hook. Because obviously we were the first people to get implicated in this whole thing where it says, it can be, it moves around in restaurant, which is true. You can't deny that fact, but you still had to. It was everyone's bread and butter, and it was very difficult. Then we finally managed to convince the government to unlock for a bit for deliveries.
Yeah.
And I remember I ran a skeletal staff of 4 or 5 people, and I put out this beautiful thing, and I called that menu, these are a few of my favorite things. So I basically created a menu of my favorite things and put it out for delivery from Olive.
Okay.
And it became a wild success. So a lot of that happened, but it took a lot out of you because you were there on the front lines, breathing the same air as a whole bunch of people who were going God knows where, with delivery people, etc. But you had to just keep doing this, putting yourself in harm's way to just earn a few bucks so you could pay a few salaries. And I think after that, I really thought very hard about it. Like, was all this necessary? I mean, were we that? Sure, it was devastating for the industry at large, but there were ways of being able to handle it. And I just have this nature of working very hard. So I just took the hard way out. I could have easily said, no, this is not safe and I don't want to do it. But I'm not the person who's going to shirk away from something like that. So I think it was a culmination of all these things that sort of came together. And I'm like, okay, I think it's time to finally bid goodbye and see, I'd rather do it now and not later, because then it may become too late. I had dabbled in other things in the meantime. Obviously, Begum Victoria was one of them. It was more like a little side passion project. And then, after I got out is when I started thinking. I gave myself 1 month, and that's exactly how long I rested. And then soon started working on creating a new company. Thought that catering would be a great opportunity because it would take time to be able to secure funds, and I was tired of new. I was like, new is getting boring. New is not sustainable. Maybe it's time to go back to basics. Maybe it's time to just bring restaurants back to what restaurants were meant to be. There's too much noise. There's too much drama. There's too much, everything. But why aren't just great restaurants opening anymore? And I think that's what Lupa was about. And I have said it, and I continue to say it unabashedly. I am not going to try to push you. There is so much technique and stuff going into the food there. I don't need to talk about it.
Yeah.
The guest will be able to discern it.
Yeah.
If there is quality, they will be able to tell. That back to basics approach, I am very, very happy with. I had spent 6 months perfecting a piece of bread, and that gives me tremendous joy. I would spend a year working on the perfect gelato, because I had this beautiful gelato little room with a lab. Vinesh has always told me he wants that machine someday. We have a beautiful Carabriga machine, which nobody else has in the country, I think. And it's antiquated. But there's a romanticism around it because that's how gelato was made originally. But I also have a cheese business separately, so I can get the best milk for it. And that's all gelato is. It's great quality milk, great quality fruit or whatever else you're using, and that's it. End of story. And sourcing is the king. I am very, very proud of my sourcing. It's taken me a long time, but it's all impeccable quality.
Also, with Lupa blending European roots and Indian influence, how do you curate a soundtrack and the ambience that complements this hybrid identity?
Oh, these days sound is such a nightmare. I
Yeah.
mean, the younger people are asking for Afro House, and I'm like, what's Afro House? And then they play it, and I'm like, yeah, but I've heard this before. It's now called Afro House, and it's cool. We were playing this at like Olive almost 12 years ago. But sure, man, I mean, if this is your jam, but I'm not playing it, I'm sorry. Because that doesn't vibe with the rest of the space. I lose more parties in a single month than anybody else because their prerequisite is that I play Bollywood. And I said, sure, but you'll have to take the whole restaurant, where I just become a venue. So that's not acceptable to them and it's not acceptable to me. And so we part ways because I'm not going to mar somebody else's experience who came in for a certain experience and meal to be completely shattered by another group playing under a completely different kind of music.
Yeah.
I love Bollywood. That is probably the only music I would dance to. But that doesn't necessarily mean that it is applicable in this space.
Yeah.
So there's a time and place for everything. And this is the sort of place that needs something which is, it's a little up-tempo, yet it's not jarring. It could be jazz, it could be new jazz, it could be a little bit of house, but house done again more subtly. Every Friday we do a slightly more buzzy evening with a live singer and a DJ takes over, but nothing outlandish. Nothing that should destroy the dining experience. And we've had issues with that in the past where somebody, pushed the DJ to suddenly turn up the volume. I'm in the kitchen, I don't know what's going on happening outside. But the DJ succumbed and suddenly another table just got their entire experience annihilated. And that's legitimate. That's fair for them to complain. They didn't bargain for this. So you have to be very mindful. And now you go to many places and you'll see that it's just completely out of whack how loud it is.
Having trained in top kitchens from New York to Norway, which is one lesser known skill or mindset you coach young Indian chefs to pursue today?
So I run a very interesting formula and I always have, is I don't let anyone get comfortable.
Okay.
Because comfort in this business often leads to complacency. And I think that's the greatest evil that can exist in a restaurant. It stops you from being your best every day. So the moment they get comfortable working at something, I change them. I don't get rid of them, I just make them work on something completely different, which they're not skilled at. What this does is two things. A, it indemnifies the business because I now have multiple people with multiple skills, while I am very well aware that I'm upskilling them to a level where they will get a much better opportunity elsewhere very quickly. But I'm very happy with that. I have no issues against that. The system will continue. I'm only finite. I can't be infinite for everybody. But that is the one thing I always emulated because one of the first things I did was that when I was working, I was something called a chef tournant, which means I had to move to every station. So I had to be an expert at everything, not just one thing, in that kitchen. And that's what I try to do with a lot of them. Every time they try to get comfortable, it changes. So it makes a much, much stronger team.
Yeah, I agree. Also, it made me think because you've been in this industry for decades now and it's changed over the time, right? So do you think it's all for the better? Or is there anything from the earlier days in the restaurant industry that you think were better?
As a lot of people keep lamenting, there's nothing to do in Bangalore, which sounds awful because I'm sure there's plenty to do in Bangalore, but maybe not enough for the number of people there are. And that's why F&B has become the great escape for a lot of people. So this is an artificially developed opportunity. I think a lot of that has brought in people from across the country and looking at Bangalore as a huge opportunity. Then you have cases like Rameshwaram Cafe, etc., which just sort of hit the jackpot. I definitely think that it's becoming a bizarre ecosystem in some sense. There's a lot of noise. It's very encouraging also at some time because clearly this business is booming. So many people are willing to experiment now, both customer as well as restaurateur. Such great concepts coming up. Akhila has been doing such a great job with conservatory. Started with, with one-off events and then conservatory, then Naru, now middle room, Subco, everything. That whole thing is just so much fun. And I wish there was more of that, And she's been quite a leading light in being able to create experimental spaces, which lots of other chefs have come in through that and saying, oh wow, Bangalore is so happening. This is where we want to be. What a cool crowd. So yes, I think that space, in fact, it's hilarious because when my farewell party happened at Olive, that casual farewell party that all my chefs threw for me, my old chefs and whatever, existing chefs, we took over the conservatory late at night to have this big blowout party, which was a lot of fun. And I can't remember where the food came from at that time, but I think everyone was too drunk anyway. So that's a classic example of great stuff happening. The whole bar scene has really taken off in Bangalore, and the cocktail scene, the cocktail culture has taken off in a big way. Lots of brands leading that, but that's one side of the spectrum, right? I will never say that defines the city. There's a tendency, then you are bougie. There is a lot more happening in Bangalore, which is really, really encouraging. From the Rameshwaram cafes to the resurgence of great, from, Thindis and South Indian joints, which are focused on high quality delivery, better hygiene. It's not that they were unhygienic, but now it's a more visible, more tangible, more international style relatability to that product. That is 500 times bigger than all of these guys put together, right? Farm Law, for example, look what an amazing job they've done. I had never thought that a place like Farm Law would have even opened in Bangalore. The depth and variety, it's amazing. The sort of caterings we do and the demands that we get in Bangalore are incredible. I mean, everybody is willing to try new stuff. And I think that's always defined Bangalore. And that's why I was always very happy being here, because I knew I'd always have the customer who was willing to experiment. I can't say the same about Delhi and Bombay because I ran restaurants everywhere. And it was different. Bangalore was always more welcoming and prone to experimenting.
A superpower I'm trying to cultivate is knowing the best thing to order on any menu. So what clues do you look for?
I mean, if you have great service, usually that sorts it out.
Okay.
Because they'll be able to maneuver. And like I said, if you don't have a mindset where you think that everyone is out to rob you, then life becomes much easier.
Yeah.
And trust your server.
Yeah.
It's not like he's going to shove the most expensive thing down your throat every time, right?
Yeah.
And that's why even at Lupa, we have choices. We have upgrade options. This is a great drink.
Yeah.
The menu is printed in front of you. If you are somebody who only believes that I want to have the best of the best, that is available. It's not being sold to you. That is a choice you need to make.
Yeah.
Right? But otherwise, the base is as much as anywhere else. So people, the server's job is to make sure he's selling you a high quality drink, not the most expensive alcohol. The most expensive alcohol is your choice. Right? The drink is priced, it's in front of you, it's very transparent. And that's with food also, right? So there isn't that many upgrade options available any which way. But if it's a group of people, if they're ordering too much food, you will be told this may be too much. Why don't you pare it down and then see if you want to add on more later? If they're ordering just one app, and this also happens, a table of 4 comes in and they just order one appetizer, and you tell them very politely that, okay, but this just may not be enough. And if, I mean, you can say, happened as I was leaving and coming up for the interview, I saw these 4 kids jump out of the auto rickshaw and ask the security guard, Lupa. So I was like, okay, this is probably the first time over here and they probably don't have a budget for this. But if that is, the staff is sensitized and saying, if you feel that there is that awkwardness there, suggest something which is a lot more filling that can be shared. So I don't want them to leave thinking that, I wasn't, and they will get their free bread and this and that. So even then it should feel, okay, not bad, right? I've always considered Lupa a big, from my side, my gift to Bangalore for all the kindness that Bangalore has shown me over the years. So it has so many beautiful things. And then they go and decide. and what fits their occasion, what fits their budget. They may be doing some high-powered entertaining, so they have big budgets. Maybe they just want to have a glass of wine, which is not available by the glass, but we have a beautiful caravan program which you can get glasses from sealed bottles. It's a very cool thing. It's a nitrogen flushing thing. But we get everything, right? And we need to be able to manage all of that. So it's not like, I'm not a burger joint where you can just go in. I know that, and there's some great burger joints now. There's a new thing now, right? Burgers everywhere. And I'll have my smash burger and I'll have my shake. I'm not that place. So the variables are tremendous. And you'll dress up and come for this. You won't dress up necessarily to go for a burger.
Finish the sentence. A chef is only as good as...
His last meal.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
From breaking culinary conventions to building spaces that spark conversation, Chef Manu's journey reminds us that creativity thrives when we're unafraid to challenge the norm. If this episode inspired you, share and subscribe to the New Indian Express YouTube channel. Thanks for listening to the Expressions podcast. Catch you next Friday for a brand new episode.